Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. So this podcast right now is a bit of the format is quite off the cuff. When something comes into my mind, I just grab the recorder and it's a bit of a free flow thinking. Nothing is planned, nothing is scripted. Eventually, maybe there'll be a greater format and I'll be able to get some other people onto the show, so to speak. But for now, I'm just going to dive into different topics that kind of come through. So I want to talk a bit about the dynamics of relationship because there's nothing like romantic relationship to bring up our stuff. And one of the things that I say to the couples that I work with, and even the individuals, it doesn't necessarily have to relate to a romantic relationship. However, like I said, that's the arena where we get most triggered. So one of the things I say is, well, what if we were to begin, what if base ground was don't take anything personal? Just don't take anything personal. Now that sounds really weird because sometimes when somebody behaves in a certain way, it's hard not to take it personal because it seems personal. And I think really the two things that I think are the most important not most important. Two aspects of being human that are really important, especially in relationship, is having awareness and knowing how to communicate. And as I said in my last podcast, we are not taught to be human, right? We don't learn these things in school. So communication is something that I would say majority of we humans really struggle with. You know, we tend to communicate in very kind of passive aggressive or attack and defense. It's hard for us to just kind of be in our own experience and to speak from the place of I. This is my experience. This is my observation. Instead of you do this and you do that, we can be very blaming and very diagnosing. If you know anything about nonviolent communication, you know that offers a bit of a structure. So if we're not taught that, and then on top of it, we're not really shown how to be in a state of awareness. And what I mean by awareness is just to flex the muscle of self-observation. I don't mean self-critique, but that part that can observe our experience, that just sits a little bit above or behind us and can witness what's going on. Like what's going on for Corinne right now. You know, she's thinking this, she's feeling that. And it's both the experience that I'm having internally within myself, and I'm aware of my body and the sensations and my thoughts and my feelings, but I'm also aware of this aspect that's like observing it all, that's holding it all. And it becomes the relationship between these two parts. And I will speak a lot in parts that there's this part of us and that part of us, and how do they communicate between one another. It might seem a little schizophrenic in the beginning, but actually it just gives us enough space to self-reflect. You know, when we talk about narcissism or self-absorption, there isn't that space to look at ourselves. And if we can't look at ourselves, it's very hard to know what's going on for us. And it's very easy then to project onto other people and to take things personal. So this whole idea of what if we were to begin by not taking things personally? We have to have a great enough awareness of ourselves and enough of a base where we perhaps trust ourselves and believe in ourselves to be able to not get triggered and take something personal. But the thing is, it still happens. You know, I've been doing this work for so long, and I work with individuals doing this, and it still happens. You know, I think there's one thing that's really important to understand in self-development is there's no place that we arrive. And it's like, okay, brush it off, dust my hands off, I'm done, I've arrived, I'm perfect now. No, we will be forever growing and evolving till the day we die and beyond, if that's your belief. So it happens, but I think what I'm recognizing is okay, it happens. I will go through my own set of feelings, thoughts, triggers, insecurities if it brings that up, or disappointments or whatever it is. I'll go through my own human experience. And as I've said many times in the last couple podcasts, I'm learning to just stay with it, just stay. And it's hugely uncomfortable. But stay without reacting. Like hold responsibility for it. Just hold it with love. Like that's part of self-care, is just hold your human experience, and especially the emotions, especially the challenging emotions. Just hold it. Even if it's hard to get to the place of loving this discomfort, it's just hold it. And then I think once we give ourselves enough space to do that, like I recognize that I had an experience. It's like, okay, something affected me. It was hurtful. It didn't feel nice. There was an element where I took it personal, or where there was an element that just didn't feel good for me. But I stayed with it and I slept on it. And then it's not that I forget about that, because that still exists and that still needs to be spoken to. But what happens is once we've stayed with our stuff long enough, and we show up for ourselves, we take care of ourselves, we listen to what needs to be, heard, what needs to be expressed within ourselves, we tend to that, then all of a sudden we can see things slightly more objectively as possible, and we can begin to see, well, what is going on? What was going on in that moment for the other person? And here's the thing, a lot of the time, we're not even conscious of our actions. This is where the awareness piece comes in. So most of the time, we're not even conscious of the way that we're showing up and the way that we're reacting. So someone, for example, might be pushing someone away, and so then the other person takes it personal and goes, "Oh, they don't love me. They're not choosing me. They don't love me." Whatever the story is, but actually, maybe they're in a state of fear. Maybe their own shit is coming up. So the truth of the matter is we don't really know until we communicate, and until we communicate in a way that's not attacking or defensive, like when we can actually communicate authentically and transparently and honestly and keep it in the I experience. But until then, we're only making assumptions. And so what if we were just to assume that even though I took this personal, for example, that okay, that signifies something in me that I need to look at, or it signifies something in the relationship that, one needs to look at, or it's something that's going on for that person. And can I just try to look at it from their perspective? And that leads us maybe to having more compassion, more patience, more understanding, and therefore a greater ability to actually move through something not in a triggered state, because it's like, okay, if I don't make this all about me, if I don't take it fully personal, what's going on for them? Where are they struggling? And again, they might be completely unaware of it. This is what I see happen most with couples is like they come to me and they're just caught in this vicious cycle and pattern, the same argument over and over and over again. And as a friend of mine said once, it's like, right, we continue having the same argument until there's a resolution. If there's no resolution, the same stuff is going to come up again, because the whole point is it needs to be looked at. It needs to be worked through and, eventually to find a resolution for it so that we don't have to repeat the same patterns. But people come, they get stuck in this pattern, this argument, and they're just speaking to the surface. They're speaking to the superficial. They're not actually going into that place of vulnerability to say, I'm scared in this moment, or I feel shame in this moment. I feel insecure. I feel vulnerable. I feel rejected. I feel whatever it is. We often are so skilled in a way to put the armor up and to be tough and to be strong, that it becomes really defensive. And then the very thing that we're actually needing, which is love, acceptance, connection, care, empathy, gentleness, we don't get that, because we don't even allow that part of ourselves to be seen, which would, I see it, I observe it, I witness it. When the couple can finally drop into what's going on beneath the surface, below the triggers, and they get to the truth of what's going on for them. No blame, no pointing the finger, has nothing to do with the other person. It's just like, this is what's going on for me. So one is we need to learn how to take care of ourselves first. And that is our responsibility, each of us individually. But once we can reveal our truth, our vulnerability, and we can stay in our experience without blaming the other person, most of the time I see that the other person's like, oh, wow, I had no idea that that's what you were going through. And then comes the empathy. And then comes the connection. The bridge is being built back between both people. Because again, what happens is if we're speaking on a superficial level, if we're defending, if we're armoring ourselves, if we're attacking, if we're pushing away, if we're avoiding, all of the kind of stuff that the mechanisms, the coping mechanisms that we use to not face and feel our vulnerability, we create disconnect. We disconnect from the other person. And then that's what becomes painful. Because we all fundamentally have a need for connection, just like we needed that connection and that healthy attachment, not codependency, interdependency, and the healthy attachment that we needed from our parent. So a lot of stuff stems from our childhood because maybe there was a moment where there didn't feel like there was a healthy attachment, or something came in and severed it, or, there can be a multitude of things. But essentially that's what, we're needing and wanting. And above and beyond that is our connection to ourselves, so that we don't self-abandon, that we actually are creating that very connection that we're longing to receive from someone else. We need to create that within ourselves so that we feel held, supported, safe, not alone, connected, acknowledged, validated. All of these things need to happen on the inside. And then from that point, there's just, you could even go into a kind of more spiritual perspective that everything is one. Everything is connected. So sometimes the challenge of being in these human bodies is it feels very disconnected. It feels very lonely, like we're in our own little compartments. And I remember it was, I think, Glennon Doyle in her book, Untamed, that had just such a beautiful analogy of, it was something to the degree of feeling like, if we're all water of the ocean, we're all drops from the same ocean, but it's like we get placed into buckets. She says it much more eloquently and beautiful, more beautiful than what I'm saying, but it's like, that we're in these little compartments when we're all just the water of the same ocean. And, we all have our coping mechanisms. I definitely, what I've learned in my life is it's really helpful to observe, like, how do we self-protect? Sometimes I really pull back and I kind of go into my shell. Sometimes I go into victimhood. Sometimes I go into feeling like I need to be really tough. Sometimes I can feel literally the hardening of my heart. And it has been such a journey and lesson to, in those moments of pain and hurt and sensitivity, like, how do I soften? Can I literally feel my heart softening, literally feel it softening. And at first that can feel really scary because it's like, oh no, if I'm soft, then I'm vulnerable. Like somebody can stick a spear into my heart, where actually our heart is at its strongest when it's open. When we're living from an open heart, there's like this expansion. We become bigger. We become really powerful, not the kind of power that we're seeing in the world. That's a completely different, very convoluted power. But I mean a real personal power that isn't based on greed and taking and, selfishness. I'm talking about the essence, the true essence of power, which is when we're really within our true authentic self. We're in our essence. We're in our worth. We're in our just who we uniquely and beautifully are. And that's so expansive. And in that expansion, it's like nothing can touch the sides. We take things personal when we're really in the story and in our wounding. And this expansive state can hold the wounding. It's like, what is the container? We all need to create the not hard container, not the bucket, not the one that compartmentalizes and separates us, but this container which you could see as like one massive embrace, or like a big globe of light around us, something that almost etherically holds us and is always there, ever present, holding us. So, all right, I'm going a little far out there. I'll bring it back in. So coming back to this, like, okay, how do I tend to myself so that I don't need to take it personal? Or maybe I take it personal in the beginning, but how do I move through that so that then I can come to a place where I can see it more from the macro perspective? I can have the bird's eye view and take all things into account. And what I will continue to probably repeat is, how do you bring love into all of that? Because it's really easy in relationship, especially when there's fear, to become hard, and almost it's like people become enemies. You see couples that it's like you think they wonder, well, how did I ever love this person? But you did. You fell in love with that person. You love that person. But it's like layers of experience that harden. It's like things get calcified, and you've got to chip away at the calcium that's built and come back to its pure original state. And so, as I said last time, love is the thing that can transmute anything and everything. Love is the greatest alchemist, but it requires us to be humble. We've got to put our pride to the side and go, okay, what would love do now? Maybe it means I can't be right, But at the end of the day, love is actually going to bring us to the place that we want to arrive to, because we want to arrive to harmony. We don't want to arrive to, I was right, you were wrong, you're the asshole, I'm the hero, or I'm the victory is mine here. We don't want to play the game. The game is painful. What we want is love, harmony, connection, peace, safety, security. And righteousness doesn't have a place in all of that. So let's see. The invitation today is to just pose this question of like, what if I were to begin by not taking things personal? And if I do, that's okay. Let me tend to that first. Let me show up for myself first. And then let me see what's going on for that person. Like, put myself to the side for a moment. What's going on for that person? And try to see it from their perspective. Put yourself in their shoes. And then it's what I call, like, you have to come to the table. Both individuals need to come to the table and be honest and transparent and authentic and vulnerable. I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it, but I got to say it that, if we really want a relationship that is meaningful and fulfilling and full of deep love, we have to be vulnerable. Because let me tell you, I've been in relationships that don't have any vulnerability, and it's impossible to have true intimacy without vulnerability. It's impossible to have true intimacy without an open heart. You can pretend. It can be all, nice on the surface, and things can look good, and things, you don't ever have an argument and things are okay. But at the end of the day, is it really fulfilling? Is it really meaningful? Do you feel like you can fully rest into it? So, yeah, just some questions to ponder. Anyway, to be continued. Thank you for listening. Wishing you a beautiful day.